I'm Seth Rogen. Welcome to CareCon. I'm in maybe one of the most boring rooms that's ever existed here on the Warner Brothers lot in Burbank. Um, and today's panel here is comedy for caregivers, finding and accepting light in dark times. And what we have assembled is people who have made it their business to be funny or talk about being funny, and to turn personal material, be it happy or sad, into that comedy for the most part. And that's something I've done over the years as well. And I continue to try to do, even though it's not always that fun, but the result can be great. So now I will introduce some of our panelists here, and we can get into it. That's my own bio. I don't need to read that. But one of our first panelists here is Cristela Alonso, a comedian, producer, author, actor. She made TV history when she became the first Latina to create, write, and produce and star in her own network sitcom, Cristela, for ABC. She was the first Latina lead in a Pixar film, in Cars 3, which is fantastic, and my nephews watch that, I'd say, conservatively 200 a day. She is on a lot of talk shows. She had stand-up specials, lower classy, middle classy. I assume upper classy is on its way. It's not.
Yes.
Real and completists like myself are really left hanging. You do advocacy work and fight for issues like immigration and healthcare for lower income communities, and is an all-around amazing person, and I can't wait to hear from her. Another panelist of ours is Danny Klein Modisette, the CEO founder of Laughter on Call. She's a comedian actor, and she wrote the book Take My Spouse Please, which sounds funny. She's on the Forbes 50 over 50 list, although you wouldn't know it. And she taught stand-up at UCLA for 10 years and has been a speaker at a lot of places that are incredibly impressive, like Stanford, MIT, Columbia, UCLA, Dartmouth, Harvard Business School, and many of other impressive institutions that I would never dare step foot in. Trevor Noah is the most successful comedian in Africa.
Don't read the whole thing, please. I'm having a moment right now with my bio.
To be
no, let me explain. I'm having a thing right now with my bio. I'm trying to fix it. It's very long. Seth, please don't do it.
What two are the biggest hits? Let's go with most successful comedian in Africa. That's a good one. You should keep that. For as you pare down your bio, I would keep that.
Okay. There's only like 7 of us in Africa, though, so it's not. It was impressive when I wrote it because Americans didn't have like a yardstick, but okay.
It's still pretty good. I would say
you're the best of 7.
Yeah, exactly. 7. I know. I'm from Canada. I'm like the 5th most famous comedian from Canada, and there's only 5 of us, I think. So that's not that good. The Daily Show, obviously. These are the ones I would choose. Africa comedian, most successful, Daily Show with Trevor Noah, so many Emmy nominations, and obviously a show everyone found famous, your Netflix specials, and #1 New York Times bestselling author for Born a Crime. I wrote a book, and I was a #2 New York Times bestselling author, and I lost to Bill O'Reilly, which is perhaps the most bitter pill I've ever had to swallow in my life, and I'm still pretty angry about it, being honest. Jesus Trejo is in his car, first and foremost.
You could just say from Long Beach for me. I can't compete with y'all. Long Beach, California.
Therefore, in his car. Very on brand for someone from Long Beach, I would say. He's a wonderful guy. He has a comedy special, Stay at Home Son. You wrote on This Fool, which is a hilarious show. He's on Mr. Iglesias. And he's and I want to be on your Tacos con Todo show, which is a web series from First We Feast, which is
let's do it.
That sounds fun. I'm in. So let's get in. I could literally fill this entire panel just by reading your bios, because you're all very so that how's that? I'll start with you, Jesus, because it seems like you got somewhere to be. If your car starts moving, I'll be.
Well, I mean, I thought it would be so fitting since we're doing a caregiving thing. I'm actually right outside the hospital. My fiance's inside getting a thing done, so it's good. It's all good, but I feel like how fitting. I mean, caregiving. I'm here. Put your car where your heart's at, and
Where
it's
your
out
panel
front
is.
of the hospital.
Put your car where your panel is the
Yeah,
expression.
no kidding. You're so method, Jesus. You're so method.
Thank you, Christella. Yeah, I try to be. So here we are. Thank you so much, and I appreciate everyone's patience with the car thing.
Oh, not at all. You're
I
really
love the
upstaging everyone.
seatbelt.
Yeah, it's yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we don't know where we're gonna go. We want to be safe, even in conversation. You know what I mean? So
Well,
come on, they took my spouse in there. She's in the hospital.
I understand. I'm
Thank
sorry.
you. Little callback. I appreciate it. Thank you.
You've dealt with adversity a lot, it seems. It's coming up
Yeah,
against.
adversity from doing a panel in a car for sure. We can start there, but yeah, I've been a caregiver for a long time, Seth. You know, my mom
talk to
dealt
me
with.
about yeah. Tell me your story a little bit.
Yeah, so I've been a caregiver for like 20 plus years with my mother specifically. You know, my mother was, you know, she dealt with dementia. You know, about 15 years ago, she had like sundowning, and that kind of complicated itself. So you know, my mother had a brain surgery. She had meningioma. I'd say like yeah, like around the 15 years ago, and that kind of like sped up a lot of things, whether it's like, you know, schizophrenia, bipolar, and, you know, dementia. And, you know, unfortunately I lost my mother last year, and, you know, I can just tell you firsthand that, you know, caregiving is your whole, like, it becomes your whole like identity, existence. It's every waking moment. It's like, how do I take care of my loved ones? And, you know, but there's a lot of funny stuff that happens. I mean, it's like the only way you can, you know, deal with something like caregiving is with humor. And you know, it's like, I remember I used to have to buy diapers early on, you know, for my mother. And when you're younger, like, you worry about what people like, are they laughing at me because I'm buying diapers? Because Costco doesn't make it easy. You walk out of there with an 80s boombox amount of diapers over your shoulders. You're like, great. So I had this brilliant idea. I'm like, I'm gonna go to CVS like at midnight and buy diapers there. No one's gonna say anything. But you don't realize that the cashiers are bored at 1 or 2 in the morning, so they're gonna ask questions, you know. And I remember one time they're like, "Hey, I see you buy diapers all the time at this weird hour. Like, who are they for?" I doubled down. I said, "Oh, they're for me. I hate doing laundry, so I go with these." And she's like, "You know, they have men's sizes." I said, "No, I like women's sizes. They make my junk look big, you know." So you try to go with, you know, you try to find the humor in this tough journey. But yeah, that's a little bit about, you know, my caregiving journey with my parents.
And did you immediately start talking about it comedically? Or is it something that took you a while to decide to do on the journey? Or like, do you remember a moment where you're like, I'm going to start like trying to make this funny, you know?
Yeah, I think I'm very grateful that I tried to talk about what, like, I decided to talk about what I know early on, which was, you know, I didn't know nothing else. It was caregiving, you know. It was my mom and dad. I'm an only child from immigrant parents, and, you know, just kind of speaking to that journey, you know, even like early on, one of the jokes that I felt really proud of was like kind of, you know, putting my existence in a nutshell, which was, you know, growing up, you know, got educated. I'm the first in my family to get educated, went to college, then followed my dreams of being a comic, and then mow lawns because I had to take over my dad's landscaping business when he got cancer. So it's like I'm happy that I was able to find the humor in sometimes dark areas, and I don't know, it served me well. I've connected with so many audience members. I think that's been special. But yeah, caregiving is an ongoing thing. I'm caregiving now for my dad, and you know, it's for my fiance. She, you know, she's in there. So caregiving is an ongoing experience, and, you know, I did a documentary with AARP years ago about caregiving, and what like I don't know where I pulled this from, but like I live by it, which is, you know, the saying where it says like it takes a village to raise a kid. I also feel like it takes a village to allow somebody to age gracefully. So that has been my caregiving journey.
That's amazing. That's very beautiful. I put my grandparents wound up in the same Jewish old folks home that every other Jewish people in Vancouver wind up in. So I hope that could be more graceful, I think, for a lot of people. And yeah, I think especially in North America, there's like not a great mentality towards like taking care of older people. You know what I Yeah. Danny, can you maybe talk a little bit about how like laughter promotes like actual resilience among caregivers, you know?
Yeah, of course. And Jesus, I also have I had the cancer dad and the Alzheimer's mom, so that's a fantastic sandwich. But yes, so of course, laughter and resilience. You know, it's so interesting. So most people probably know here about the physical benefits of laughter, like it releases endorphins, it raises your serotonin level, dopamine. So you have all of those hits. That's just good for your body and promotes resilience. But what I have found helping people in all kinds of struggles with isolation is that the laughter, it creates a sense of belonging, like a connectedness. Like when you laugh with someone, you just instantly feel less alone and you have trust. And I think that promotes resilience. And the other piece of it that I found really interesting is like when you're able to laugh, it gives you perspective. So and then once you're laughing about something, you have the sense of like, oh, wow, if we can laugh about this, then maybe there's hope. Like, I do feel like it's a window into hope. And when you have that, that gives you more resilience as opposed to everything being dire and hopelessness. And that's not to say that, you know, there's a cure for Alzheimer's, which right now there isn't, right? But there are moments within, it's like what I always say, like, it's really sad. Nobody's going to argue with you. It's sad, but it's not sad every moment. And I think leaving yourself open to those moments that aren't sad, where you can actually capture a funny moment or a laughter connection, it just allows you to find those moments of joy and connection on this very long path. So that's what I think contributes to feelings of resilience.
Great. Trevor, my friend, you've obviously talked a lot about, turning, more complex and negative things from your life and experiences and challenges that you've had into, incredibly entertaining and hilarious and meaningful, material. Yeah, like maybe talk about your journey with that and how you became comfortable with that and how, has it helped you and have you seen it help other people? And I mean, it's something I know so many comedians who experience terrible dark things and never talk about it. They just, it would be unheard of for them to really get into it, and so yeah, I'm curious kind of how you had a relationship with that.
So, it's interesting, Seth. Oh, by the way, Jesus, Africans, we're the ones who it takes a village. That was us. Just so you know, you were
That's
like,
a
I don't
good
know who
one.
that is. It actually is us. But yeah, it's interesting. I think before I went to therapy, I think I used comedy as a tool to avoid what was happening to me, which I think a lot of people actually do. We tell a joke because we want to avoid the truth or the reality of what's actually happening, what we're experiencing. And what happens is you get to circumvent that feeling. You get to turn it into something else. And oftentimes it helps you get over it, but it doesn't help you deal with it. And it took me many years of therapy and living life to change how I would use my comedy for myself and maybe even for the audience, where now I work through the thing and then afterwards I find the funny in it. I no longer look to the funny to try and get me through it, and I think what that does is adds a little complexity to the funny. It makes it more dynamic. You don't chase the laugh at the price of the the fidelity, the very real nature of what's happening to you or to the society you're speaking to. And I find that's actually where the funniest things come from, is when you're dealing with something, when you're crying. Like last year, when my grandmother passed away, she passed away at 96 years old. She was lucid till the end. She won. We all say in the family, we like, she won. Well done, Granny, you did it. 96 years old, and you know what I mean, fall asleep and then don't wake up. It's the way everyone
That's
wants
what
to
you're
go.
hoping for. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it.
I will say it's a little shitty for the people who then think you're gonna wake up in the morning because it's like a prank. There's no warning. You just come in and you're like, hey, morning. And it's like, no, it's not. And she's gone. And you're like, well played, Granny. Well done.
Good one.
But but the thing that I realized like after she went was like the grief that we experienced was so real, and we would cry, and then in the middle of that, in the middle of those tears, we would recount a story my grandmother would tell us, or we would share an experience, and the laughter that would come from that because we were dealing with the pain, I found was so much more it was so much more real, and it was healing. It didn't feel like we had buried anything. And so I think what I'm always trying to do is find the honesty of these situations. My grandfather was bipolar and suffered with manic depression. So, towards the end of his life, we didn't know which reality he was living in. And we never knew, because unfortunately we didn't have the resources in South Africa. Just the healthcare wasn't in the right place. We didn't know if it was dementia, if it wasn't, or what he was dealing with. But we were seeing a human being who we knew forget us in real time, and we still had to treat them with the same love and affection that we would as if they knew us. It was a really trying and strange experience. And oftentimes, the only way we could find consensus was through laughter. The only way we could, confirm each other's reality was really through the laugh of acknowledging how absurd the situation actually was. So like when my grandfather would, take the car because he needed to go and fight in the war and help the Allies against Hitler. And we're like, it's 1998. What are you doing? Where are you going? You can't help but laugh with each other. You know what I mean? You there's a moment where you all have to verify each other's existence and experience. And so I think that's what I'm always trying to do, is use humor as a tool on the other side of processing the pain or the emotion.
And have you found that people have found it, your own work has, really helped other people? Like, have people come up to you and specifically like told you that? I mean, I imagine at times you're talking about things that there's just also not a lot of
Yeah.
people talking about it all. So I imagine it's very cathartic for people to hear you
Yeah.
speak about a lot of this stuff. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I find the more honest you are,
Yeah.
the more vulnerable other people become.
Mhm.
We live in this strange world where, and I know people will blame social media, but I think it goes deeper than this. We live in a world where everybody pretends. Everybody pretends. And so because everyone's pretending, everyone is afraid to be the person who spoils the party for everybody else. Ironically, everybody has a parent, a family member, a loved one, and anyone who's experiencing the worst health situation. And when you share that, surprisingly, the people around you open up because they go, oh, I didn't want to spoil the party and bring this up. And someone else goes, oh, I didn't want to spoil the party and bring this up. And what you realize is there is no spoiling of the party. There's a vulnerability that opens you up to people that then allows them to be their full selves. And then that's when the healing, I think, begins. And so I've learned that. I go, hey man, I'll share the messy with you. I don't try and intentionally get into it because it's, I'm not trying to live my life as tabloid, but I think there are things that are worth sharing between, our village that can help all of us to heal or process the pain of the situation that's very real, because as Jesus so eloquently said, it is continuing and it is your life in many ways.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, I think for myself as someone who deals with very sad things at times, but also, kind of peddles in comedy like that. Like I find it's like a needle to thread at times between being honest and resonant and just being a bummer.
Yeah.
And I think that's and I think my fear of just being a bummer probably is something that I very much, my therapist says I have to deal with still, and I'm not quite where you are yet. So maybe maybe one day.
It's a work in progress.
Yeah.
I haven't gotten over it. Don't get me wrong. It's a constant work in progress. Nobody wants to be a bummer.
No one wants to be I've met actually plenty, like my dad doesn't mind. I know a lot of people who are actually completely comfortable being a bummer. Probably why I don't want to be a bummer, because of how comfortable my dad is being a bummer, if we want to get into it. Anyway, Christella, sorry. I mean, you are dealing, speaking of being a bummer versus how to be funny. I mean, you're a caregiver and you work in comedy. How has balancing those things shaped your career and your work and all that stuff?
I will actually say that I am a bummer.
Oh, good.
That is the name of my next stand-up special. I'm a
A
bummer.
bummer. You got to stick with the formula, though.
I actually, for me, I've been a caretaker since I was, I'm 45 now, and I started caretaking when I was 13. So I grew up in a very old-fashioned Mexican household where uh, the parent would pick what child would take care of them whenever they got older. And my mom picked me when I was a little kid. So I was the youngest of four. And what I didn't know is that when she did that, that meant that I was chosen to be everyone's caretaker for anything. My sister had a baby, my oldest nephew, who is about 11 years younger than I am, and he was born with special needs. So in the summers, when everybody else was having fun, in summer break, I was shipped to my sister's house to help take care of of my nephew while, being a teenager. And that was kind of like my whole experience in life was to never have a childhood. And, it was this thing that for me, I was forced to grow up really fast. And I had this love of theater. And, I fell in love with theater when I was about 8 years old. I was watching the Tony Awards on CBS. And I remember seeing Jonathan Pryce. He was the engineer on Miss Saigon. And I was just like, I want to do this for the rest of my life, and everyone in my family, we grew up in poverty. So our version of work was blue collar, manual, physical labor, and they couldn't understand the idea of having a job where you created and thought. It just wasn't something that was part of our lives. So because of that, my dream, I'm a first generation Mexican American. My family, mixed status family, so half of us were undocumented. And we grew up, we had a really rough time where, like, the first 7 years of my life, we were squatters in an abandoned diner. We were homeless. So I was taking care of my mom. I was taking care of my family, but also it's very misogynistic, right? Because I'm the woman. So it's like, I'm the youngest of four, but I'm the woman. So I'm the one that I'm expected to take care of everybody. And then what I realized is that my mom ended up getting sick, and I had to drop out of college twice. First, to take care of my sister's kids. Second time, to take care of my mother, because my dream wasn't a real dream. I was doing theater, so it's like, well, it's just what you're doing. Like, just, it's silly. Come home, take care of everybody. And I did. And I actually, even when I came home, I lost my mother when I was 22. And I was in the room with her when she passed away. No one else, none of my siblings would be in the room with her. And I told her, I'm like, you were there when I took my first breath, and I'm going to be there when you take your last. And it was what I think I had to do for her. That was at age 22. It took me, like, the specials that I do are called lower and middle classy, because my entire journey has been about catching up to life, meaning that I put so much of my life on the back burner that even when my mom passed away, I had family saying, well, now you got to get a real job. And it's like, well, no, now I have no responsibility holding me down. I can actually go live my dream now. And everybody's like, you tried. And I kept saying, I didn't try. You guys kept me from it. So I decided to try stand-up, because back then I wanted to do theater, but in 1997, I had a voice teacher that said that as a Latina, I could do West Side Story and I could do Chorus Line. And then I was done. And I did a tour of West Side Story and I did a tour of Chorus Line, and I was done. That's why part of me kind of hates Hamilton nowadays. It's like,
that one.
I mean, a little too late, Lynn. So it's like, but it's this. It is, for me, this thing that I do with my comedy is I talk about the gift of money in living in this country, and how we are taught that taking care of oneself and your family is a luxury, and how, for me, coming into this money, and not a lot of money that has allowed me to get health insurance, to take care of my family so that when they get sick, they can go to the doctor. It's like, that is the luxury. That is my version of lower and middle classy. The last special I did middle was talking about me going into therapy. Like Trevor, when you're talking about your journey with therapy, I'm thinking, God, you sound like such an after picture of my therapeutic journey right now that I'm like, I want to get there, you know? But it's this thing that in my first special, my last joke was telling everybody the story of my mom being on her deathbed. It's about 10 minutes long. It's very sad to some people, but I always, I tell this story about how my mom and I, we weren't like, she wasn't very emotional. But when she was on her deathbed, I told her, like, I'm going to tell you everything that I think of you, how I feel, because we don't do this and you need to know. And I went on this long thing about how much I loved her. And I wanted to say that before she died. And then she didn't die. And then she lived for another year.
Oh no.
The
Like when you say
entire
goodbye to
year.
someone as you're walking to your car and you realize
Yes.
you're walking in the same
And
direction.
they're parked next to you. Like, you know what I mean? So it wasn't, you were like,
You said
so-
goodbye already. What do we do?
Yes, it's like, Mom, I already did this. Like, we can't do do-overs. It's done, So when that happened, the rest of the year, she would ask me for things. And every time I would say no, she's like, oh, I thought you loved me. You know what I mean? And it took me 15 years to be able to talk about that in a funny way, because the grief was so hard. And I felt so guilty about the feelings I had during that time. Sometimes I hated her. Sometimes I hated the situation. Sometimes I was angry. Sometimes I was, just frustrated. But I realized that those were the actions of not being able to talk about it enough.
Mhm.
It's what Trevor was saying, it's like, we don't want the bummers. We don't want to bum people out. So we force ourselves to try to have this face where we're the strongest, we're the most awesome people, always in a good mood. We're like freaking Snow White, right? We're just there everywhere talking with animals and stuff. But in reality, once everything is gone, you realize that at the end of the day, you only have yourself. And when you have yourself, you have to take care of yourself because it's all you have. So for me, I'll tell you, one thing that's helped me in stand-up is that there are a lot of things coming up in stand-up that you see so many comics wanting to fight for. I want to get this. I want this hour special. I want this, da, da, da. And for me, my priorities were always different because in a weird way, I lived so much already that to me, I didn't think about those things as top priority. For me, the ability to be able to do the dream that I had to stop and start so much, that has always just been the most important thing for me.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. If people have questions, I can't guarantee I'll ask, but put them in for one another. I'm also talking to our viewers for the chat. Please put them in the chat. If they're exceptional, I'll ask them. And if any of you have questions for each other, please feel free to ask questions to one another. Danny, did you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to speak to Trevor's point too. First of all, these stories, I'm feeling very much like the white lady in the room. I'm so like honestly,
That's how I felt too. So yeah.
I know. I did a comedy show about eating disorders because that's what white ladies do. We talk about anorexia and bulimia. But okay, but the point that I wanted to make is, it's very interesting. When my mother was first diagnosed, and I had this idea with Alzheimer's, I had this idea to bring comedians, and to make people laugh. And I would be at dinner parties, and I did not want, not a lot of dinner parties, by the way, maybe one or two, but I would mention this, and inevitably, it would end up being the topic of conversation for all these middle-aged people. Like, that was not my intention, but I think because this disease is affecting so many people, as Seth said, like, we all know someone or someone said, we all know someone who knows someone, that when you start talking about it, when you have the courage to actually talk about whatever, but in this case, Alzheimer's in particular, like, suddenly everybody wants to talk about it. And I think what's great is to be able to talk about it, not as the biggest bummer that it is, okay, but to say, like, no, but actually you can be with the person and you can experience and you can find some laughter and joy and connection and all of that stuff. So I do think it's interesting that we don't want to talk about this stuff, But more and more, I think there's more opportunity for that and more openness to it.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of openness, Jesus, you, as you mentioned, had a documentary made about your life and your family. I mean, you couldn't have opened yourself up more than that, really. Talk to me about the choice to do that, if you were afraid or resistant, and what the experience of really kind of sharing your life with people in a very
Yeah.
explicit way has been like.
Yeah, I think it was challenging. I think at first when AARP Studios reached out and said that they were interested in doing a documentary where I would be the subject and my caregiving would follow that journey. I don't know that I was comfortable with it. It's like we talked it over with my parents and that kind of thing, and they said that it would have been cool. And I got teary-eyed, when my mom and my dad said, it's like, other people go through this kind of thing. It's like it's like, I don't know why anyone would watch it. He's like, I think people are gonna get something out of it. It's like, and I think it's cool. It's like, I'm like, are you sure? And then I remember waiting to reply back, and I followed up again with my parents, and we had the conversation again. It's like, yeah, I think we should do it. And I don't know, caregiving is very complex. One thing I will say, it's like just hearing everyone's story, it's bringing back so many cool things, but also it's kind of like the aftermath of caregiving, right? It's like you're left with all these feelings and this kind of thing. And one thing that I was able to get to a place in therapy where you accept that I did the best I could with with what I had at the time is such a empowering thing. And I think that documentary, I haven't seen it. I can't see it anymore. It's too heavy. But just the thought of it lets me understand that as an up and coming comic, I didn't have a lot of resources, and I was able to do the best I could with what I had, and I'm very proud of that. Comedy has been good to me. It's been an outlet. I found my community. I found people that I've resonated with at shows. After the fact, we've talked about what walker's the best, which commode's best, which diaper brands. You're like these kind of silly conversations after the fact that I don't think I would have had that conversation with anyone if it wasn't through comedy. So, is it hard to open up? Yes. Am I grateful that I have comedy that's given me so much to my loved ones? I've been able to provide, is like I was able to, thanks to comedy, I was able to soften the landing for my mother, and for that I'm forever grateful. Yeah, I mean, and I mean, everything else is extra. It does not matter. It's like, if I was able to do that for my mom, I want to do that for my dad and my loved ones. If I could keep doing that through comedy, I think we did a good job.
That's great. Trevor, I'm gonna ask you, there are things I've joked about in my life that people, my loved ones, have come to me and said, don't talk about that. And people in my life and publicly, people have resoundingly conveyed the notion of don't talk about that. But at the same time, there's sometimes things I want to talk about, and sometimes they're met with a proportionate reaction. Sometimes I met with what I would consider a disproportionate reaction, but I guess it's all kind of part of it. Like, how have you navigated, and what has been your experience with talking about things that maybe people wish you weren't talking about, you diving into subjects that some would say don't joke about that, but it's a serious thing, or don't talk about that. I mean, as a Jewish person especially, there's a lot of don't talk about that out in the world, like maybe keep that around the dinner table, and sometimes I talk about it out in the world, and so I think, how have you dealt with that kind of thing throughout your career?
So, one of the biggest things I've come to learn is that all comedy is context. All comedy. The reason somebody's laughing is because you have found the same context with them, and so you're processing reality through the same lens.
Yeah.
I don't begrudge anybody for saying that's not funny, or somebody saying you shouldn't joke about that. I get where people are coming from, because when something is happening to you, like, you know, like when I've had things that, let's say when I had an issue with my knee, or when my, you know, when something was stolen from my house, or I do not think it is funny in that moment.
No.
I do not think it is funny. I remember once this happened to me early on. This is the reason I still don't wear Crocs, by the way. So I
I was
wore
wondering why.
Crocs.
You keep
I wore
returning.
Crocs. I wore Crocs before like anyone wore Crocs. And I mean like early on. When I tell you I got roasted, my friends, everybody was like, what are you doing? What are you wearing? These are terrible. Who invented these? What child designed these? Everybody roasted me. This was I was still living in South Africa. This is, I mean, almost 20 years ago now, maybe 15, somewhere there. My house gets robbed. They steal everything. I walk in, my house is robbed. I call my friends. I'm devastated. I didn't even have insurance, nothing. And we're walking around the house, just, you know, taking stock of the fact that everything's gone. And we go to my bedroom and we walk, and the closet's been ransacked. All the clothes have been stolen. And then I go, they've taken everything. And my cousin looks down and he goes, oh, but they left the Crocs. And all my friends at the same time started laughing. They laughed. You know that guttural laugh that comes from deep inside a human? They laughed so hard. They had so much fun with that moment that they forgot that they'd also been robbed, because we all lived in the same house. I did not find it funny. I did not get. I did not think. All I could think of in that moment was, I've lost everything, and these people have literally added insult to injury by leaving Crocs behind. Yeah, but I get why I didn't find it funny in that moment, because I was experiencing something directly happening to me, and my friends weren't in the exact same way. I think that's what people struggle to understand with comedy or with any topic. You are ready to deal with something because you have been ready to deal with it. You are ready to think that something is funny because you've gotten to a place where you think, or you've found that you have enough distance from it, you know? And so I think people struggle with understanding that. You know, when somebody goes, that's not funny, I always say to people, I go like, no, you should say, I don't find it funny right now. I'm not able to find it funny. You may never find it funny, but that doesn't mean it is not funny.
Yeah.
You know, if somebody's laughing at it, there's a good chance that it is funny. And so what I'm always aware of is the fact that, like, one, I'm not trying to hurt anybody. Two, I do my best to, you know, find the context and understand the situation that I'm in. But I've even seen it. You will be in a hospital with your family members making a joke about something that's happening with your own family members, and somebody can overhear you and they can go, you shouldn't joke about that. You should, how can you joke about that? And you go like, yeah, because we're on our journey. We're in a different place. We're taking nothing away from you. We're not saying your experience is supposed to be funny, but this is our experience. This is our moment. And so in a strange way, I try to process people through a generous lens and go, they're not mad at me. They're mad at the feeling that they're having because I've reminded them of it. I understand that completely. And, you know, then I just try my best to keep on living my life. If I've learned something, I might be able to change how I've said it or think about it differently going forward, because I never intend to hurt somebody. But if it truly just is the way I see the world, and it's funny in the way that I've processed it, then it's funny, you know. And not everything is for everyone. There are people who think curry is terrible food. I disagree. So, you know what I mean? Me and a few billion other people think curry is amazing. So if you don't like curry, I'm not going to stop eating curry for that reason. You just don't like curry. And I think we can live in a world where we understand that some people don't like curry and some people do.
I could not agree more. Christella, you know, I think you seem to create work that comes from directly from your experience, and that's the thing that you know, it seems to be something that you've been vocal about, is, you know, giving people voices to kind of shed light on their personal experiences and kind of expanding the scope of the people that we do that with. Yeah, maybe talk about that and how you think that could in general be helpful for people to understand and be more empathetic, I think, to people's plight.
I think that actually having a talk like this is very important, because we're talking about caregiving, and caregiving is something that can affect anybody. regardless of what culture they are, what gender they are, whatever situation you're in, caregiving is something that can affect anyone. It's universal. Now, the way that we're talking about making it universal in this specific talk is through comedy, and I always say that sometimes if you want to teach people things that they're not familiar with, you have to trick them into learning, which is why the comedy works for me. I do think that we need more stories that allow us to give more of a caregiver lens into the world, because what I see happening in the industry a lot, and has been for the beginning of time, is that sometimes the industry, well, not sometimes, the industry loves to put you in a box to see how they're going to label you. So you're either a stand-up comic, you're an actor, you're this, you're that, you're a juggler, you're a ventriloquist, whatever, that you're a dramatic actor, blah, 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 then it makes it easier for them to know this is what they do. And then they get you into more subcategories. I was the only woman in doing stand-up, like when I started doing stand-up in Dallas, and I was just a comic. Then I moved to LA and I was a Latina comic. And I didn't know that I was a Latina comic. I just thought I was a comic like everybody else, so then it comes into this time where I want to do sets around town. And one of the clubs tells me, well, you're a Latina comic. You have to go do sets at restaurants and bars, not here. And this was in 2005, so not too long ago. So then you start thinking, oh, this industry is really good at labeling you as specific as possible. And that's what you're going to be. And I bring that up because to me, caregiving is something that anyone can do. And what we need to do is focus on actually creating more stories that unite us in that kind of perspective of what we struggle through, and actually being able to see past what we physically literally are to actually tell these stories. Because I always say that as different as we are, we all have a lot in common. It's like you're Jewish, you can be you can be Catholic, anything. But if somebody has a blue collar job, if somebody's struggling, if somebody has the same struggle, it all becomes universal. So in order to tell these stories, I think that we actually need to focus on the people that have gone through that and really let them tell their story, and not ask questions like, well, as a Latina, how did you take care of family? Like anybody else would, actually. It's like, well, can you make this script more Latina? No, it's already Latina because I wrote it. So, it's like, I can't make it more Latina. I can't make it more female oriented. Like, I don't, there's no demo. You don't write for a demo, you write your truth. And what you realize in this industry is that you're not going to be liked by everybody. Social media will tell you you will not be liked by everybody. But the point is that the people that connect with what you're saying, they connect with you because you're speaking to them. And not everybody has to do that. Some people haven't had or don't want to talk about that, and that's fine. That's the variety of content, like storytelling, that we need. We need the storytelling. Like, these stories are very interesting, and I think very familiar, the ones that we're each saying, that we've had, but our perspectives are different. And I would love to see, like, imagine if we each were given an opportunity to tell a story about caregiving. How interesting it would be to see the similarities, yet the differences that we all have in the way that we did it, the way that we came across it, the way that we've overcome it or are still overcoming it. We're all different people. We're all named different, but the struggle has overlaps. And that's what I think this industry has to do more of. We need to find the overlapping. And sometimes I think that the most important thing that people need to remember is that if you are someone who has power in this industry, sometimes your power isn't to use the microphone to speak. It's actually to pass the microphone to someone else so they can speak.
That's why I'm hosting this panel. So, what a segue. Yeah, I mean, I could start a whole podcast about how terrible the entertainment industry is. That's a whole other subject. Well, um, I think I'm seeing if anyone had any questions. We have a lot of people kind of diving in here, but it's people just seem very appreciative. Just know that there's hundreds of people that seem
Um,
to relate
Seth,
and to be happy that we are sharing these stories, and that we are able to find humor in these things, because I think
someone had a question about siblings. I saw that go by. If you've ever been in conflict with a sibling over
oh
the,
yeah. Sure.
that's
I mean,
pretty rich.
we only have 2 minutes left. I don't know if we have time to get into that one. I mean, from my personal experience, I've seen, and I think we're at a very, I know a lot of people. I know with my wife on her journey, at times there has been, yeah, I mean, not everyone processes these things the same at all, right? And just because you're siblings with someone, it doesn't mean you're remotely emotionally in the same place or dealing with things in the same. I think yeah, from what I've seen, the less conflict you can have between your siblings on these things, and the more you can focus on the things that are control, or truly outside of your control, and the better. Like if you're up against dementia, squabbling with your siblings about it is not going to help at all. But,
Yeah. I did end up engaging a moderator, a mediator, a moderator.
Mediator,
That's
there you
what it
go.
was.
That's good advice. Mediator
I
with the
hired a
sibling is
comedy
actually
moderator.
good. Yeah,
No,
mediator with the sibling is good.
yeah, it's like we could have used a comedy moderator, but actually what I hired was a mediator, and just the threat of the mediator actually helped us. Just knowing that it was out there, we ended up having a much more real conversation.
It's a
So
great idea. The fact that one sibling thinks you need a mediator probably tells the other sibling, "Oh, I'm being if my sister threw mediator at me, I'd take a long, hard look in the mirror. I'll tell you that.
You mean we need a professional?
I was just like anecdotally hard to deal with. I didn't think I was like a professional level asshole here. Yeah. Well, thank you all so much. We are wrapping up our panel here. This has been really, 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 really lovely. And I can't tell you all how much I appreciate this more. Danny, Christella, Trevor, Jesus. Get back to your girlfriend, wife, fiance. What is she?
Fiance, soon to be wife.
Look at that! Congratulations. So
thank you so much. Thank you.
You're able to multitask and show your dedication to many things at once, and I admire that. Well, thank you so much, everyone. I hope to see you all soon.
Take care.
Thank you.
thank you.